Okay, so today we're going to be talking about ziggurats, these incredible structures that basically defined what a city was in ancient Mesopotamia.
They really did. If you were living there, a ziggurat would be the most massive, most important building you would ever see in your entire life.
And they look a bit like pyramids, but they're fundamentally different.
Completely different. A pyramid in Egypt was a tomb. A ziggurat was, well, it was more like a religious tower, a stepped pyramid, and it was always located right at the very heart of the city.
The spiritual heart.
Exactly. Its whole purpose drove its design. The Mesopotamians believed their gods and goddesses lived up in the
So
heavens.
they needed a way to connect with them.
Precisely. The
Hmm.
ziggurat was a symbolic bridge. Think of it like a literal stairway to heaven, a meeting point between the divine world up there and our mortal world down here.
And to make that statement, to make it believable, they had to build big.
Oh, unbelievably big. These were massive public works projects. They took years, sometimes decades, to build and required the organized labor of thousands of people.
So let's talk about the design itself. That look, it's not the smooth, angled sides of an Egyptian pyramid.
No, it has that very distinct stepped or tiered appearance. It's like they stacked giant platforms on top of each other, with each one getting a little smaller as you go up.
And the base was huge.
Huge. A massive square or rectangular foundation, sometimes stretching hundreds of feet in each direction. It was all about creating a powerful presence.
What I find so interesting is that the inside was completely solid. You'd think with a building that big there'd be rooms, maybe burial chambers.
But there's nothing, not a single room or hallway inside the main structure.
Why? Why do that?
It was a very clear engineering decision. They chose height over internal space. The entire solid core was just a foundation to get one small, very important room as high as possible.
And getting up there was an event in itself.
A huge event. The biggest ziggurats had these enormous staircases, sometimes three of them, that would rise from the ground and meet at a kind of grand landing point partway up.
So it wasn't just a simple path, it was a journey.
A pilgrimage, really. A symbolic climb for the very few people who were actually allowed to go up.
And you mentioned its location was always at the heart of the city.
Always. It was placed inside a special walled-off area called the Sacred Precinct.
So like a fortress for faith.
In a way, yeah. It separated the holy work from the noise of the everyday city. And inside that precinct, you had everything needed to run the city's spiritual life.
Like what else was in there?
Well, you'd find smaller temples, huge storehouses for grain, workshops for craftspeople, and crucially, the royal palace.
The king's palace was right there.
Right next to it. So the king could easily get to the holy site, which reinforced his connection to the gods. And for every other citizen, the ziggurat was just always there.
Looming over everything.
Exactly. A constant visual reminder of the power of the gods and, a visual representation of the whole social order.
Okay, so that brings up the big question. How did they actually build these things? The Egyptians had stone quarries everywhere.
Right. And the Mesopotamians had a major problem. They had no stone.
So what did they use?
They used what they had an endless supply of, right from the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They used mud.
Just mud.
Well, mud mixed with straw to form bricks. But this is where they got really clever. They used two different kinds of bricks.
Okay.
For the massive inner core, the part no one would see, they used cheaper sun-dried mud bricks. You can make those very quickly.
But sun-dried bricks dissolve in the rain, don't they?
They do, and that's why the outer layer was so important. For that protector shell, they used much, much harder fired bricks.
So baked in a kiln.
Exactly, like high-temperature ovens. This made the bricks incredibly tough, able to stand up to rain, wind, and erosion. That two-layer system was essential for the whole thing to survive.
And what held it all together? You can't just stack bricks that high.
No, you need mortar. And they use something called bitumen.
Bitumen.
It's a natural tar, basically. A sticky, black, waterproof substance. It's kind of an early version of asphalt. It bonded the bricks together and helped waterproof the whole structure.
It's incredible. So let's talk scale. How big are we really talking about?
The best example we have is the Great Ziggurat of Ur. Its base was about 210 feet long by 150 feet wide.
Wow.
And it was probably over 100 feet tall.
It's like a modern 10-story building.
Pretty much. Imagine standing at the bottom of that in an ancient city and moving the millions of bricks it took to build it. That required some serious planning, with ramps and sleds.
The amount of material must have been staggering.
I mean, the number of bricks in just one ziggurat could have been used to build hundreds of normal houses for people. It was a total statement of the city's devotion.
Which brings us back to the ultimate question. What was at the top? What was so important that it justified all of that work?
At the very peak, on that highest platform, was a small temple, a shrine.
The High Temple?
Right, sometimes it was even called the bedchamber of the god.
The god's bedroom.
That was the belief. That this was the room where the city's main god or goddess would come to rest when they visited the mortal world.
I imagine it was pretty spectacular.
Oh, absolutely. It was often painted in these brilliant colors, deep blues or shimmering gold, so you could see it sparkling from miles away. Inside, priests would keep a statue of the god and a table for offerings.
Who was allowed up there?
Almost no one. It was the most exclusive place in the entire civilization. Only the high priests and maybe the king could ever go inside.
So no regular person ever saw the inside of it.
Never. And this is a huge difference from, say, the pyramids in Egypt. The pyramids were built to house a dead king. The ziggurat was built for a living god to visit.
So what did the priests do up there, besides the daily rituals?
They were also the city's first scientists. That high vantage point was amazing. The air was clearer, cooler.
A good spot for stargazing.
The best spot. They used it for serious astronomical observation. They would meticulously track the stars and the movements of the planets.
And this wasn't just for fun, right? This was critical information.
It was survival. Those observations were how they developed their calendars. It's how they understood the seasons, when to plant their crops, when to harvest. Their science and their religion were completely intertwined.
And I've read that there was immense pressure to keep the ziggurat in perfect condition.
Immense. The people believed that if the ziggurat was well maintained, the gods would be happy, they'd send rain, they'd provide good harvests.
If it started to crumble.
Then they feared the worst. That the gods were angry, that famine or disease or even war was coming. The pressure was unbelievable.
But the ziggurat complex was more than just a temple, wasn't it? It had a practical day-to-day function.
It absolutely did. It was basically the city's central bank and warehouse.
How so?
Well, the temple priests managed huge areas of farmland, and they collected taxes, not in money, but in goods, grain, dates, livestock.
But all that wealth flowed directly to the temple.
Directly to the ziggurat's sacred precinct. It was all stored in those large storehouses at the base.
So the temple wasn't just in charge of faith. It was running the city's entire supply chain.
Pretty much. And it also acted as a social safety net. In a time of famine, the temple would distribute that stored food to keep people from starving.
And there must have been a whole bureaucracy to manage that.
A huge one. Scribes were constantly at work in the temple offices, keeping detailed records on clay tablets of every transaction, every tax payment. They even organized the production of things like tools and textiles.
So these structures, they didn't just appear overnight in this perfect form. How did they evolve?
It was a very slow process. The earliest ones were actually just simple one-level platforms.
And the goal was just to lift a shrine above the floodwaters.
That was the practical beginning. Then, around 2100 BC, you see the shift to the big, multi-tiered ziggurats we all recognize.
And later empires took it even further.
They did. Cultures like the Assyrians and Babylonians added more steps and started using these beautiful glazed bricks in different colors, blues, yellows, reds, to symbolize different parts of the universe.
Are there any famous examples we can still see?
The Great Ziggurat of Ur is one of best preserved. And of course, there's the famous Enki in Babylon.
That's the one people think inspired the Tower of Babel story, right?
That's the one. It was dedicated to the god Marduk and was so unbelievably massive that it's widely believed to be the inspiration for that biblical story.
So what happened to them? Why aren't they all still standing?
Well, when empires fell, invading armies would damage them. But the real enemy was just time and a lack of maintenance.
The mud bricks.
Exactly. Without a team constantly doing repairs, the rain would get past the fired brick exterior and start washing away the soft, sun-dried bricks inside. Over centuries, they just crumbled into what looked like large, lumpy hills.
Until archaeologists started digging them up.
Right, uncovering these incredible structures hidden inside.
So when you put it all together, ziggurats weren't just big buildings, they were everything.
They really were. The religious, economic, and administrative center of the entire city, all built into one giant symbolic structure.
They show us just how advanced and complex these first human civilizations were.
They really do. The roots of so much of our modern world banking, astronomy, even bureaucracy, it all started in the shadow of these massive buildings thousands of years ago.
So the next time you look at a calendar or think about how a city is organized, maybe think back to the priests on top of a ziggurat tracking the stars. It really changes how you see
It
things.
really does.
Good luck with your studies. See you next time.